All right, so we are going to do our coil pot today, and the first thing we need to do is get our bowl ready for clay. So you're just going to take the bag, put it inside, and kind of just tap it in there so that your clay won't stick to your bowl, and we can actually remove it out when we need to. And if you want, I did a little sketch of what I think I was going to do on the inside of my bowl. You don't have to do this, but it helps you think. It's a technique you can do. I'm going to put those out of the way, and the first thing we need to do is make ourselves some coils. I'm going to make a bunch here just so that I have a lot for the demonstration. I wouldn't recommend that you make yourself 10 to 15 coils because you might not use that many in this time and you can't save the coils. So I would just make 3 or 4 at a time for you when you start this. So when you're rolling a coil, you're just making sure your hands are tight, like they're almost bending back, like you see mine right there. And you're just gonna roll that back and forth, spreading your fingers out and stretching that little rope of clay out. And you're gonna try to do this as evenly as possible. So you may have to move your hands around if one area is still thicker while the other is smaller. So you just kind of adjust as you're rolling. And you wanna kind of go for like the thickness of your thumb. If you know you have like really small hands, then maybe a little bit larger than your thumb, so that these are nice and thick for melding together the technique we're gonna do. So I'm just doing this kind of in slow motion just for you to really see the process of rolling it out and stretching that snake out. And then I'll zoom it up here a little bit for the rest of these coils. But like I said, about the thickness of your thumb is good. I notice I'm putting it on some plastic as well, so I really recommend that for you too. Just put like a plastic shopping bag down to try to eliminate as much air as possible that gets to your coils, and then I would cover that as well while you're working. But again, you don't need to make yourself this many because you're probably not going to use 15 coils in one class period. Alright, so now I'm going to just show you some things you can do with coils, like some patterns you can make before we get started, just as a little info session for you guys. So right now I'm cutting these all to the same length because I want my swirls that I'm going to make to be the same size. So if you're somebody and your design is that you want your swirls to be all the same size, and you need to cut them to the same size first, okay? And when you're rolling a swirl, you want to first just gently kind of tuck in that end and then start to swirl it together. The more you work with these coils, the drier they get. So it's important, if you do like mess up and restart a few times, if it starts cracking all the time on you, it's time to just discard that clay and get yourself some fresh stuff. Now there's a couple things you can do with these coils once you have them. You can use them just like that as little fun swirls, or you can tap them into like a square type swirl. So now we have a cool square. I could cut that in half and have like a little triangle. And I can make a pattern with those little triangle guys. I'm doing another one to show you how the pattern can continue. It's a little hard to hold it up. And I could do that same thing with the circle swirls and just do like little rainbows. You could also just roll a bunch of coils out and make your own little rainbow, but if you made the big swirls, then you kind of get 2 out of 1 right away. You could also, you know, just twist some coils together. You could braid some coils. This one I call the intestine. I just kind of like wiggle it together. Kind of just makes a fun little pattern. Then again, I'm going to cut a bunch to the same size, and you can use just straight coils to create patterns as well. So I'll cut these ones. See, I just remembered I need to cover my coils that I made. So you can stack them in any way you want. You could like do that pattern all the way around your bowl if you wanted, something like that, or some variation of it just by cutting the coils to certain lengths. And then this technique I'm going to show is like writing names and letters, which is kind of an advanced technique. So if you're feeling like, oh my gosh, this seems hard, then definitely kind of keep it with the basics of making coils like twists and swirls and, you know, circles and cubes. So I'm actually writing the name backwards because this is going to be the back of it. So I'm putting it backwards so that I can smooth those coils together so they stay together. And I'll just do this kind of and fast forward so you can see it, but it's not too lengthy. So now that I got all the letters kind of curved out, then I need to smooth them together where they connect to make sure that they stay together. So I'm just going through and making sure they all touch each other somewhere and just kind of blending those coils together. Now, when you write like a name like this or a word, it's best to give it like a frame and try to fill it in a bit because it's just going to be stronger than if I try to pick up that name now and put it on my pot. So I'm just putting like a border at the top. And I could do this to the whole name, like put a border on the top and the bottom and fill it in with a bunch of little clay circles. But for the sake of this demo and time, I'm just gonna do the top section to kind of show you. So I'm just rolling a bunch of little balls of clay and filling in like the gapped areas of the name. And then I'm gonna smooth that as well to help keep all those words together. So it's just to make it stronger for this process. So just filling in all these little gaps. And like I said, I could do that everywhere and you'd still be able to read the name. Just for the sake of this demo, I didn't want to fill in all those spaces for you guys. And smoothing. This technique of smoothing the clay together where we don't have to slip and score is called melding. So it's just a fancy word for smoothing. We're melding the clay together. Since the clay is all at the same state, we can get away without slipping and scoring it and just meld it on. Since we're working with soft clay to soft clay, it should just, you know, it'll stay together better than if I try to smooth on some soft clay to something bone dry. So now I'm just peeling that off. It probably would have been a better idea to do that on paper, but now you can see the front. That's the way it'll go on the pot. All right, so now we're ready to actually work in the bowl. So I'm going to show you how to get started. If you have a drawing that you're trying to reference, you know, keep your sketches out so you know what you were thinking. It's fine if they change, but just so you know what they're thinking. I find it the easiest to start with a swirl for the base of your pot, just because it takes up that whole bottom of your bowl usually and just kind of gives you a good base to go with. And then I'm just going to follow my pattern. So next I was doing a row of circles and I did want them to be the same size. So I'm going to pre-cut them to the same size and then roll them and put them in the bowl. And again, so once I have them all cut to the same size, I can just start rolling these up And they're not going to be perfectly the same, shape. It's about the same size so that it's like keeping my pattern going. So I'm just placing them in there, kind of following what my plan was with the swirl and the circles. And I'm making sure I'm placing those on the wall of my bowl, like they're not on top of my swirl, they're on the bowl. I'm just going to go ahead and meld those together gently. What you have to watch out for when you are melding inside of the bowl is your pressure should not be very forceful. You're just kind of blending that little top layer of clay together. So if I push too hard while I'm in the bowl, it's going to just flatten those coils and all those patterns you're making, and you won't be able to see them when we do take it out of the bowl because you have smushed it so hard. So it's just little gentle pressure. And you notice there I cut through both of those to make it a perfect connection. You don't want to just swirl and swirl and swirl. So then I'm doing some more cuts to the same length because now I'm going to do some like straight up coil patterns in the bowl. And again, I'm trying to do this relatively, it's in fast forward, but I wish it fast forwarded even faster for you. But bear with me, it's good to see and watch and hopefully understand all the time it takes. This will be one of our more lengthier kind of complicated projects. Just the building of it's relatively quick, but then the cleanup of all these coils does take some attention to detail and some time. And keep in mind, you can't keep the coils. You have to just ball them up, spray and bag that clay until next time. The coils dry out relatively quickly. So I'm just filling in that bowl. And then I'm going to meld it together again. Now say this is as far as you got today, you have to make sure you meld your clay every day before you put it away. So I can't put that away and then come back to it tomorrow and meld it together because now my clay is at a different state. So it's really important that you meld your clay together every day before you put it away because that's the key to being able to not have to slip and score every single coil. Now, if you know you can't remember to do that melding or you're worried that you're not going to do a good job, you can still slip and score every single coil. However, I've been teaching this for 13 years now, and I don't have anybody slip and score every single coil, and the only time that this is an issue is when people forget to slip and score the first coil of every day and then their pots come apart. So you'll see what I mean about the first coil of each day as we move on in this project. But you see when I meld it together, it's not a perfect little, it's just a little rough smooth for now. We'll clean that up later. Now I didn't like that these were uneven, the same level as the bowl. And then I'm going to try to get that name on there today right away too, so that I don't have to do that again another day, because I wouldn't be able to save that either. It would dry out and I wouldn't be able to bend it. So first I just did a little smoothing. Then I'm going to carefully place this on top of that last row of coils I did, and again meld the connection points into my pot. So really making sure we're taking some of that clay either from the bowl or from the letters and blending it together. And then I would want to fill that gap before I put it away for today too. Sometimes it's just about like doing what's going to be easiest for the next day, because if I left that gap and sprayed and bagged this and put it away, then tomorrow I will have to slip and score all those spots to fill that gap, or is that tongue score just 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 that top section. So again, I just kind of measured how tall it was. I'm cutting with the butter knife to fill it in, and then I'm going to meld those in together too. I also melded it on the outside because I wanted to look like one continuous coil instead of two attached. And I'm just blending it in. And I'm just using my finger for most of this. I find coil pots are the easiest just with your hands. If you have longer nails, you can use the back of your nail as kind of a blending tool as well, or you're welcome to use those wooden modeling tools that were provided for you, or some sort of a popsicle stick. Just something if you get a complicated shape or a little nook and cranny that you can't get into with your finger, you can use some tools. I'm just not big on the tools. I like to use my hands so I can feel what's going on. So you can see it's very wiggly right now, so I want to just put it away and let it become leather soft. So I'm just going to like loosely bag it so that it can get dried up a little bit, but not too much. I still want it soft, just not that soft. So this would be day 2. Now it's a little firmer. You see it's still soft, but it's not like so squishy that it's going to collapse on itself. So I'm just going to start by cleaning it up a bit. So I'm just taking my finger and smoothing some of those big clay lumps out that I left the day before. I definitely want to work on cleaning that inside as I go, because as I get taller, I might not be able to get my hand in there very easily. So just really making sure everything is nice and smooth, not a lot of lumpies in there. So just doing a little touch-up work before we start adding more coils today. So and you notice my outside hand is always on the outside of the pot, kind of supporting it as I smooth so that I don't accidentally break anything. And there you go, I got a tool. Must have had a spot that, was really hard to get. Just grab a tool if you need, or you can use the tool the whole time. Sometimes I just feel like the tools make more marks than our hands. Now I'm going to take it out of that bowl. So we're done using the bowl. We just kind of used it to seal that shape and get the coils. But you see there's like some plastic marks, some wrinkles from the bag in there, and we will clean that up later. Now luckily I didn't press too hard and totally flatten my coils. They're still very much round and evident, but you will get those little plastic marks. So now we're going to clean this up on the outside as well. So I'm just going to use my hands, of course. Again, I have a little dish of water and a small paintbrush. So this paintbrush that I'm using is actually just from your little kid set of watercolor paints. So if you have something like that, great. Maybe an old small makeup brush, or if you have some paintbrushes and you could trim it down so that it's got just a little bit of recommend. If you have something like that, will work really nice for you. So I just kind of cleaned up the surface. Now I'm going to show you how I use that paintbrush tool. So I actually use the end of it as well as the brush. So that's just the end dipped in water. And I'm just kind of cruising through all the coil creases. So what this does is it helps seal those coils together, because coil pots do like to crack if they're dried too fast. But since we kind of seal off those little cracks and crevices by doing this to every single coil connection, it's going to help reduce the amount of cracks we get. So I'm just dipping, like I said, the end of that brush in the water and gliding, and then I can dip the brush part in water and kind of smooth that over, as well as my finger. And this is the part that makes or breaks your coil pot. So if you want it to look really nice and cleaning up, this is going to take you brush part of the forever. Okay, so really just pay attention to all this is going to take you forever. Go over every single. Okay, this is the one part you should not skimp on, because it really does make it look, elementary to advanced level. Okay, so just really taking your time and going over every little thing. However, I do warn, do not get crazy with the water because these are just leather soft. So if we start adding too much water to them, we're going to weaken the clay. It's going to collapse. You're going to have to start over. And you're not going to be like, do that, do that, do that, do that. So now we're going to add some more coils to this. After I've done some cleanup to the exterior, it's not perfect yet on the exterior, but it's time to add some more clay before it gets too dry. So again, I'm just kind of going to make a bunch of coils to get ready for the demo. Try to do it fast. And this might be like day 3. Maybe you spent all last class doing all this class. But this is another time when it's really important that you try to follow the guidelines of where you should be at and what state your project should be at, each class, because you're going to get behind if not. So if your project isn't at the right state during class, then I would really make sure it gets that way, and maybe you make up that hour later that night or Wednesday or the weekend. Okay? Just letting it sit until the next time is not going to be good for you. So now this is technically just my second day of going to then slip and score the first coil of that day, because now the pot is a little bit stiffer and my clay is soft. So to make sure they stay together and bond, I have to slip and score just like we did with our previous connections. And I only have to do this to the first coil because then the rest of the coils I add today, I can just meld them together because they are soft clay to soft clay being attached. So that's a really important process that you know that, okay? Making sure you meld it. If it's soft to soft, you can get away with just melding it. But that first coil of each day, since they are at different states, they need to be slipped and scored. So I'm going to show you how to create shape. So what I actually want to do with this is kind of have the shape kind of come in and then come back out like a traditional standard vase shape. When you do start lapping your coils, you want to cut through both so that you have an even connection. If I just started swirling my coils around and around and around, my pot would then be built crooked because one and the other and the other. So that's why it's important that you cut that connection even. So I want my pot, like I said, to start coming in. So I'm putting it on the top inside edge of my previous coil. Not the inside edge, kind of the top inside edge. Again, cutting through both coils to make an even coil. And then I'll do that again, going on the top inside edge to kind of bring that form shape inwards. But I would always wait till you have maybe 3 or 4 coils stacked before smoothing the exterior and interior of your pot, just because otherwise if you do it every single time, that's working harder, not smarter. So now I'm just going to take my finger and meld those coils together again, just gently, like the outer surface, because I don't want to change the shape of my pot. And again, you could use a tool, you could use the back of your nail if you have longer nails. But I'm just kind of forming those together. Notice my hand is on the inside as well, kind of supporting that shape. And notice I'm not getting too obsessed with getting it perfectly smooth right this second. I'm just worried about making sure they're connected. And then I'm going to do that on the inside as well. Again, I'm going to use my finger, or you can use a tool or a popsicle stick, the back of your nail, just to get those coils also smooth together on the inside. And if your pot's getting out of shape, you can use those little painter sticks to kind of paddle gently, or just your hands work too if it's nice and leather soft. So maybe this is the end of your day. I'm pretending I'm spraying it and we're gonna bag it. We want it to stay leather soft, okay? We don't want it to get leather hard or anything like that. So now pretend this is the next day. And what do we need to do to that first coil when we start building it? Is slip and score. But first you're gonna start with some cleanup as usual, what you do every day. So again, dipping into the water, going through every single little coil creasy, getting those crisped up. And I know this is not exactly in frame, but you've seen that process earlier. So just every single one, going over it. If you missed some yesterday, this is the time to do it now before it gets too firm at the bottom. If it gets leather hard, it's not really possible to, smooth together your coil seam. So you definitely want to keep this leather soft. As you finish cleaning up, you're welcome then to let it get, more towards leather hard, because you don't need to clean it up anymore. But until you're completely satisfied with, the first couple inches there, then definitely make sure you're keeping it soft. So going back and forth with the end of the paintbrush as well as the bristle part of the paintbrush, and then maybe even a finger. Again, limiting the water usage because we don't want to weaken it. We just want to smooth the surface, okay? So you should still feel your finger dragging on the clay. If it's slipping all over, then that means you're using too much water. And there's like a little nugget of clay there that I didn't like. I just took my loop tool and carved it right off. It was like a little rolled over piece. So like I said, this is going to take you forever, this cleanup part, because you can get really obsessed with every little, wrinkle, every little seam, but it really does make it worth your while for this project because it makes it look really neat and streamlined. It makes your patterns really stick out. So some areas are done, you can tell the difference from those areas versus the others. Yeah, if you got clay on the end of the paintbrush, just wipe it off so that you can actually continue to glide through. So I'm just making sure you guys are seeing a lot of this cleanup process because it, like I said, it does make or break your project. So once you're happy with your little coil patterns, or maybe you just need a break from working on your coil patterns, you can start getting rid of the finger melding marks in your smooth area. So I'm just using that rib tool. Again, when you use the rib tool, I have a little curve to it. I just put it on a piece of paper because it's going to rotate easier now. So I have a little curve. I'm supporting my walls by keeping my hand on the inside and outside. And I'm just scraping those divots out. So the point of the loop tool is to get rid of lumps and bumps. So it should actually be shaving and removing clay. It's gonna leave some tool marks in terms of like scrapes, as you can see, but those are usually so minimal, you just use your finger to smooth those over. And now it's time to add some more coils. So since my clay is at a different state than the coils I'm going to make right now, I have to slip and score that first row. So I'm just scoring up where I'm going to put coils and grabbing my coil. And you got to score that too. And then you only need slip on one side. You don't need to put slip on both. You score both pieces, you slip one. And I'm going to have it come up a little, and then I'm going to have it flare back out. So remember to go inwards, we're stacking on the top inside edge. To go just straight up, we're stacking directly on top of each other. And then to go outwards, which I'll show you in a little bit here, you'll be stacking the coils on the top outside edge. So right now I'm just going straight up to kind of create a little neck. So I'm stacking them right on top of each other. And like I said, I'm not going to meld, every single coil as I go. I'm going to stack, 3 or 4 or however many I need to until I need to change the shape. So I got 3 going up, straight up for my neck. And I'm going to meld those down. So again, just using my finger, taking like the first little layer of clay and melding it together. Melding is that fancy word for smoothing. Again, notice my hand is on the inside, supporting that inside shape as I meld on the outside. And then when I meld on the inside, my hand will be on the outside of the shape as well, supporting that too. So the inside, as your shape's getting smaller too, then you might want to start using the tools more regularly, as maybe your hand can't fit in there as easily anymore, but mine's pretty open now. So now we're going to have the shape come out like a flare. So like I said, we're going to put it on the top outside edge. I wanted to make sure my pot was nice and even before I did that, otherwise my rim would look even wonkier. And that's still the same day for me working, so I don't need to slip and score that. However, if you had to put yours away and come back to it, you might have to slip and score. Remember, it's important that you keep this leather soft through the whole process. So depending on where you keep your piece, that might mean, spraying it once and keeping it bagged until next class, or it might be leaving it bagged loosely. It might mean spraying it heavily every day if it's really dry where you keep your piece. So it really just depends on you, and that's your main thing that you need to do. Otherwise, you end up having to start over. So it's really important, like if you have to think of it as homework, you always have homework in clay because you always have to make sure your project is at the right state. If you overwater it, you can make your whole piece collapse and have to start over as well. So it's really important that you monitor your clay project every day. So I finished stacking my 2 on the top outside edge. So again, I'm just melding those gently together, not being super obsessed that I'm leaving, finger marks right now. Just trying to get them together since we're not slipping and scoring. Using your hands to support the shape. And then also melding the inside, either with your fingernail, a tool, just making sure your hand is on the outside as well, supporting your shape. You can kind of pinch a little bit. I saw I had a thicker area. Maybe my coil wasn't as even. I see I have like a little divot from a skinny part, so I'm just rolling a little mini coil for one little section, not going all the way around, just to fill that gap a little bit. I'm gonna blend that in. So that was because one of my coils I used maybe was a little thicker in one spot and thinner than the other. So I just wanted to make sure I balanced that out. Again, just pinching, trying to make it look nice and even. And then I'm going to have a lot of cleanup work for what I just added again, you know. I'm going to have to rib tool. So as you see, all my finger drag marks, not worried about it. I know I can clean that up with my rib tool. So I always just start with my finger, get what you can with your hands, and then go on to the tools. But you see this leather soft state is really nice for, you know, getting things smooth together, because it can hold its own shape, but you can still manipulate the surface really easily without tools at this point, and then with tools even better. So I'm done building with my coils. Now what's left is all the cleanup. So I'm gonna let it stiffen up a little bit, put it away for a day, spray and bag it. All right, so we're pretending it's gotten a little tiny bit softer. It's still leather soft, but we've let it kind of, you know, coagulate together. And now we start the super fun process of the refinement, you know, using that rib tool to get the lumps out from using our fingers to smooth. Once we get the lumps out, then we can just use our finger. And I put it on that piece of paper again so that it would kind of spin easily for myself, make our lives easier. The less we have to pick it up, the less likely we are to drop it. So now there's less lumps, still tool marks, but we can then just glide our finger across to get rid of those scrape marks. The inside as well, same method. Hand on the outside supporting that shape, and just trying to spin and smooth out those big lumps from melding it together. So it should actually be removing clay, remember, so it should have a little curve to it so that you're actually scraping the clay away. And then my little neck is actually too small for my rib tool to fit inside. If yours isn't, great, that's good for you, makes it easier. But if it is too small, then you'll just have to use like your finger to kind of get that inside nice and smooth without a tool. So you see what I mean, that neck is a little rough, but I'll just clean it up with my finger. Because my clay is nice and leather soft, you know, I can still change the shape easily with just my hands. So like I said, it's going to take you forever, all this cleanup work. What I noticed a lot on the pinch pods is that you guys would cut the rim and it'd be very square and blunt and not really inviting. So make sure you like take your fingers, dip your 2 fingers in water and kind of pinch and round the rim of this as well. Makes just your pot look a little more finished. But I'm just going over showing you, I didn't even finish this today. There's still a lot to be done to it, but I just didn't think you could watch me smooth it up anymore. I know it's probably a little boring, but I thought it would be helpful for you to see it over and over again, as we kind of had difficulties last time with the refinement and those kind of finishing processes. Okay. So, this time I had you guys watch, how to make the project from start to finish, because that's kind of what we would have done in class, more or less. I'm hoping that will kind of give you more of an idea throughout the whole process. Then you can go back and watch these and fast forward and clip on the clips that you need when you need them as we work. I'm thinking this project should take us 6 classes. So kind of keep that in mind, and I'll kind of keep that calendar on our agenda. But you really have to make sure you monitor and keep at the proper state every day. Okay. If you have to start over, you're going to really have to haul butt and work Wednesdays and weekends to meet those due dates. Okay. So there you have it.